Brian is our wonderful tech guy extraordinaire. He does so much more than that, but he's also super helpful for anything I could need during that. So with that being said, welcome to our live chat. This is our third live chat of the competition year. I was going to say of the year, but I remembered we are now in 2023. So like I said before, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you could keep yourself on mute throughout this presentation, that would be great, just for some feedback. And if you have questions that come up during it, we're going to have some of our CyberGuide staff or our eCYBERMISSION staff monitor the chat box. So if you want to write down your questions there, you're free to, and we'll address them at the end. If you want to just wait until the end and ask them, you're welcome to do that too. So with that being said, before we get started, I do want to introduce you guys just to our CyberGuides who are here today. So I'm going to let them introduce, where they work, how long they've been a CyberGuide, and just their name, and then we'll get started. So Alex, if you want to kick it off by introducing yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Tobias. I'm a biological engineer, and I work for MITRE Corporation, which is a fairly large nonprofit company that does most of its work in support of federal government projects. I've been a cyber guide. I think this is my fourth season doing that, and I've also been a virtual judge. I think this is my sixth season doing that, and so very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Gregory, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name's Gregory Garrett. I'm a research scientist at the Army Research Lab located in Adelphi, Maryland. I like to tell people that I shoot lasers at things, but that's not to blow them up. That's to study their properties and to understand the materials so that we can make better systems for our soldiers to use. This is my second year as a cyber guide. I got kind of bored being a virtual judge for the past, when did this start? 10, 12, 15 years ago. So I'm very interested into hearing what the staff has to say about submitting good mission folders, because I've seen them change a lot over the years, the questions that you're asked. So awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. Keaton, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Keaton here. I'm into the IT part of the industry, and I'm in this industry for around 21 years. So I take care of various parts, primarily into the leadership in project management. And I'm also voluntarily working for IEEE. I'm a senior member there. And I want to share my knowledge with the kids out here and express how the STEM education can help them in the future, and see you all grow up from here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Alexis, if you just want to briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Alexis Marsh. I'm a third-year PhD student at Iowa State University. I study bioinformatics and computational biology, which are two fields rooted in computer science, math, and biology that try to combine the three to help make better guide wet lab research, because wet lab is expensive and time consuming, and you can be limited on what you're able to look into. So we're hoping with this computational added computational strength, we'll be able to help make a little bit more progress in those areas. And this is my first season as a cyber guide.
And she's crushing it, y'all. So also, before we get started, if you have any questions that we don't get to answer tonight, we're going to refer you guys to use the message board, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started on our PowerPoint. Okay. So we're going to be covering things that make a mission folder great. And I want to first start out by ensuring that everyone here, since we do have some new participants, I'm sure, is what is a mission folder. So your mission folder is essentially all of your work is going to go into it. It's your presentation. It's going to have a whole list of questions that you answer in depth, and you're going to talk about everything from your hypothesis to your experiment or prototype if you're going the engineering route. It's going to have your teammates, your thoughts on everything. It's going to be where you do everything. So your mission folders are due on March 1st, 2023. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that and is aware that we don't miss any deadlines. That's the super important thing. And we can't help you guys if you are late on your presentation. So we definitely want to have those done. So you'll definitely have enough time right now. I think it's January 10th. So we have some time for you to work on your folders and get those together. So I wanted to go ahead before we talk about, and show examples of mission folders. I want to ask our cyber guides, maybe Alexis, if you want to get started on what presentation or project have you seen? I know this is your first year as a cyber guide, but in the past, what's made a presentation memorable to you? What stood out?
So for presentations, one thing, so what's really tempting to do is to have a lot of text and really maybe describe your experiment in a lot of detail. But what you really want to do is, if you can, have like figures or diagrams or pictures that are kind of depicting what you're doing. So if you have a picture of, say, you collected pond water, maybe you have a picture of the pond, and then you talk about it and you say, we collected 5 samples that were each, 5 milliliters or whatever your situation may be. And you kind of talk about it that way. If you're really good with PowerPoint, animations can also help too. So maybe you do have text, but you bring up one bullet point at a time. So definitely as kind of dynamic and as with as much kind of graphics and images and stuff can really help, especially because science or STEM in general can get a little bit dense. So things like that can help keep your audience engaged and break things down into more manageable pieces.
And we'll talk a little bit further on what exactly is allowed in a mission folder and what's not. But like Alexis was talking about, images, we love images, we love graphs and stuff like that. And if you have any questions on, data analyzing, we've had a presentation on that that's also been uploaded to our YouTube channel. And we have some great links that we'll talk about through the student resources. Alex, since you've been a judge for a couple years now, what has made some of these mission folders stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, number one, as a judge, let's say, we're looking for an exciting or interesting problem, but also a problem that you and your team of middle schoolers are able to tackle and do something meaningful for. So I really like the choice of the problem, and then if it's a science if it's a science investigation project, I want to see a well-designed experiment with clear questions that are being asked, and the experiment designed to answer those questions. So the variables chosen well, that are varied, the independent variables are changed, and the dependent variables are measured. And then a little discussion or presentation of those data, and a discussion of if the changes were observed, and maybe if they went along with what was expected. But it's really more about, was the question answered? If it's an engineering folder, we really want to see the team go through at least 1 or 2 iterations or cycles of design and building, or at least drawing and some kind of testing or evaluation, and then learning from that, and then incorporating those learnings into the next round. So that's really exhibiting the engineering approach, if it's an engineering folder that you choose. And it's important to think really carefully about which type of mission folder is appropriate for your project. Discuss that with your team advisor. I've seen several teams pick what I would say was the wrong one, or the less appropriate one for their project, and then it can be hard to earn a lot of points because you're trying to fit what you did into a template that's not really meant for what you did. And then third, like what Alexis is saying, I'm looking for if the things you did, or most of what you did, was like a good science project or a good engineering project. Were you able to show that? Did you show me more than just your written answers to the questions? That can be pretty boring for for judges to read, a dozen or more of these mission folders and just have text. So we really love to see your images, your graphs, your photos, your videos. Show us, all the evidence that you have or what your setup looked like. You guys working on your projects. We want to see your data. Did you make your graphs in a careful, well thought out way to show the results that you wanted to show? So all those are important elements. And it's not to overwhelm people who are, students who are working on their projects, but and I think most of the great projects that I've seen are students who've done eCYBERMISSION more than once and learned from each time. And as judges, we're encouraged to give you a lot of feedback to help you improve for next time. So if it's your first time, don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think your objective should be to do the best project you can and learn from it and learn from the feedback you get and do eCYBERMISSION again, and you'll find how much your projects improve.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. That was great. Gregory or Keaton, do you guys have anything to add or not at this time?
Oh, yeah, I think just to add to what Alex and Alexa were saying, this folder is the only way for you to show us what you did. Your parents, your advisor, they've seen you working on these projects, hopefully for the past month or two, and they've seen all the work that you've done, but the judges won't have seen any of this. And the only way that they know or understand the effort or what you did for these projects is by what you present them in these folders. So answering all the questions, I agree with everybody. Pictures are great. Take pictures of your notebooks even to show all the notes that you took and how you did the calculations if you don't have the time to write everything out. Because again, this folder is the only way that the judges see all the work that you did. So make sure you show us that work that you did. And I think at this point in the discussion, that's what I want to say.
Yeah, thank you. Keaton, I know this is your first year as a CyberGuide, but if you have any insight.
I'll just add on to what everyone said, that a picture speaks 1,000 words. So you did not write 1,000 words. A picture and a small, you're in this latest stage where you have TikTok, Facebook, you have Insta everywhere. So what you do over there online is something you can do about your work. Showcase what value you brought to your society, what value you brought to the environment nearby you, what value you brought to other professionals. And that's something which will make us excited. So good luck to you kids.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I stuck these I always have little cartoons on my slides, just because I know that a bunch of text can get boring and I like a good punny joke or a little cartoon. So I totally agree with everything y'all have said. So moving on, see if I can get my PowerPoint to cooperate. Okay. So I'm actually going to show you guys exactly what your student account looks like, and I'm going to show you how to find the Student Help Center, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot of our resources on tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing this really quick and we'll go back to it. So let me share. All right, so this is actually the message board. So give me 1 second. So when you log into your account, it's going to look like this. If you are a student, it's going to have your little manage mission folder button right here. I want to draw attention to that. And I also want to draw attention to the right-hand side right here. This is where I was a second ago, which is the message board. So anytime you have a question while we don't have a classroom live chat or CyberGuide live chat, you can post your questions on here and you'll get connected with any of our CyberGuides. So that's a great way to use those resources. So if we're going to look for the Student Help Center, we're going to click on that Manage Mission folder. And then the Student Help Center is going to be on the right here, right below resources. And that is going to have a plethora of resources. It's going to show you everything from picking a topic, to the rubrics, to the mission folder examples, which is what we're going to talk about in just a minute. But I just wanted you guys to know exactly how to get to it. So just to recap, you're going to be on your student home page. you'll click Manage Mission folder. And then this is right here under Resources is your Student Help Center. And this is actually what your mission folder looks like. It's kind of got your overview, and then it's going to have each question that you guys will answer. And this one is an engineering one. Like we've talked about before, that there's two different paths. There's an engineering design and there's a scientific inquiry one. So you definitely want to make sure that you're choosing the correct path for your project. And one other thing I want to draw attention to before we go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to reference this later, but I wanted to show you guys while I'm here. If you see this little question mark next to the question, it's going to take you to either a Word document to explain more, maybe a video or an activity or lesson. That's kind of going to give you a little bit more insight on how to answer that question, or if you're confused about it. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, but I just wanted to show you guys exactly on how to get to everything. All right, can you guys see the PowerPoint now? For some reason, one second. Okay, now you guys should be able to see the PowerPoint. All right. So I wanted to talk about the mission folder example. So like I just showed you guys how to find that in the Student Help Center. And why it's so important to look at those mission folders examples is because not only does it have about 15 projects you can look through, but they're also sorted in what a good mission folder is, a great mission folder, a low scoring, and you can actually kind of see how yours stacks up against it. So for example, some of the mission folders that have super low scores, they have a lot of typos in, or they have my teacher made me do this. I didn't want to do this. The other kid did nothing. So definitely whenever you're answering those questions, you want to put thought into those questions because you've done all of this hard work. And like Gregory was saying, we don't know the work you've done. We don't know if you've stayed awake, late at night working on it, or worked after school instead of going to hang out with your friends. So definitely don't skimp on your mission folder because this is how we see everything you've done. And I also wanted to reference that you can find some of the winners in the past before, and that will be right here in the bottom of every homepage. You don't even have to be logged into your student account, but you can access that through the Student Help Center. And that is, that's great because that shows you the winners from a couple years to all the way up to last year, and you can see exactly what a winning mission folder looks like. These children have taken it all the way to nationals and won. So for example, I wanted to just highlight a couple of the projects that were winning mission folders for last year. In 6th grade, we had students who used variable light and sound signals to deter deer from entering the road, which is super cool because I'm a big animal lover, and also that's a community problem. I can't tell you how many times I've driven home and seen the unfortunate scene of a deer on the side of the road. These students identified a problem and they worked and had a great presentation on how to help that problem. 7th grade, they actually, another cause that's near and dear to my heart, they compared different types of algae to see how that would help bioaccumulate different microplastics. So I actually got inspired by that project. I went down the little rabbit hole and Googled, how can I use less microplastics? So not only are you spreading your knowledge with your products, but you're also inspiring like adults like us. Like we really look up to what you're doing. And then 8th graders, this was super cool too. They were testing different soil additives to add to soil that would help the plants have a higher magnesium content, because some adults have magnesium deficiencies. So they were trying to see, hey, if we add this to the soil, this plant can give this person more magnesium so they don't have to take as many supplements or do infusions, or they're not going to get sick because they don't have enough of this vitamin. And then the 9th graders had a project that was all about smart beehives and protecting and helping the bee population flourish and recover. I'm sure we all know and have seen that the bee population had took a nosedive, and it's starting to recover slowly and people are starting to care. I've seen the Save the Bees t-shirts, which is super cool. So I just want to give you guys some inspiration if you go look at their projects and see how far that they've come, and that if your project can be great just like that too. We just have to make sure we're following all the guidelines, and having your mission folder be great. All right. So moving on, I want to encourage everyone to read the mission folder questions very carefully. I have been known to be a bit of a speed reader and a speed talker. I know that's shocking. You guys are hearing me yabber right now, but I have to slow down and read the full question. And if you don't understand the question, you definitely want to hit that check mark next to the question to get more insight, or ask your team advisor. That's what they're there for. It's a trusted adult who can help you with that. And I also know that it can be hard to ask for help. And that's why we also have our CyberGuide. So if you have a question, you can post on the message board. And we also have mission control. And there's a little button that will give you the contact information for mission control. And that's just going to set you up with an eCYBERMISSION staff to help you answer any questions about your project. On the topic of asking for help, I know it can be a little bit uncomfortable. So I just wanted to ask our cyber guides if they have any experience in, the workplace asking for help and not being intimidated or being afraid is, shown that they're not as smart as their peers. Do any of our cyber guides on have any wisdom with that they'd like to share?
So I can talk a little bit about that. So I'm the group I work in, my lab is really interdisciplinary. We have some people that are really purely software engineers. We have some people that are more from the computer science background. My background's a little bit more in the chemistry and math direction. So when we're working on projects, everybody brings something different to the table. So I don't know as much about, say, maybe some of the theoretical computer science. So I ask, some of my group members, maybe my PI or a co-PI on a project for a little bit of guidance. And everybody's always super willing to help and really nice and supportive. And also, when you're in an environment like that, sometimes people will come to you too. So you kind of have that nice little exchange of ideas. So it's really in STEM, everything's really collaborative, and how you get really good work done is definitely recognizing that. So what I would say is that's waste. That's really positive direction STEM has moved into. And definitely go for it. You'll gain a lot from asking for help, and no one will look at you funny or anything, because that's just, STEM is really vast and no one can know everything. So you gotta rely on each other for that.
I love that. I believe, I'm not sure if it's Albert Einstein, but it was something like, you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. And I think that's such a great quote that, where some of us are going to have strengths and others are going to have strengths in different areas. So did you have anything else to add, any of our Gregory, Alex, or Keaton, on asking for help in the workplace or with your projects?
Can I take that forward? So kiddos, just ask the question why 3 times. Why? Don't worry if you don't have the right phrase in front of you, and just go ahead and ask those questions. There are a lot of people around you who will be very keen to help you out. As long as you ask, and it's gonna take you to some direction. If you don't do that, you are where you are. And just go ahead, ask the question 3 times to yourself, why? When you get the answer to the first question, why, again, go back and ask why with that response, and see, you'll get that response. So I encourage you to please go ahead, ask everyone around you, and they will guide you to the right team member. Good luck.
Yeah. Alex, Gregory.
Yeah, I can say just for the students, if unless you've done a project like a science project for science fair or eCYBERMISSION, and if you're just used to science and math from your classrooms, you might get the impression that the name of the game is like getting the questions right on the test, and that's what science and math are about, is like getting it correct. But eCYBERMISSION and doing projects gives you a whole other side, and it's really much closer to the real world side that us professional engineers and scientists experience at our jobs, which is it's not really a matter of getting it right. Like usually nobody even really knows what is right, or the there's a family of millions of answers that are potentially right, and we have to sort of figure out what the boundaries of that might be. So yeah, so we're always asking questions, and don't never be afraid to seem stupid, because really the really dumb thing is to not ask a question that you really want to ask out of fear of what people might think of you, because one of the best skills is asking questions. And I mentioned, right, if you're doing a science project, especially, the most important thing is the questions that you choose to ask. That's going to determine the experiments you design. So literally, science is like all based on asking questions. So keep practicing it, and practice that, and ask almost all the questions that you can think or you have the opportunity to ask.
Absolutely. I know that when I'm struggling at something at work, I always feel 15 times better after I ask a question and I get some of my peers' feedback on it, and then I don't stress about it the rest of the day. So it's great advice. Gregory, did you have anything before we move on?
Maybe if you're having problems getting somebody to answer your question, maybe a piece of advice is that you go forward with, you start with the answer that what you think the answer should be. You say, here's the question, I think I want to do it this way. Do you agree with me? Especially when you're working with a team, kind of be inclusive sort of thing. More people will be more willing to work with you and help you if you put forward at the very beginning what you think the answer should be, and then ask them, how would you do it, or how do you agree with what I'm saying, sort of thing. And then you can pull people in and start a conversation, as opposed to just walking up to somebody and saying, what's the answer?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thank you. And so, like I said, if you don't want to ask some of your students or even your team advisor, we do have the message board where you can connect with our CyberGuide. So, if you would rather do it over that than, ask someone in person, you have that opportunity too. So moving along. So I want to talk about rubrics really quickly, and this is actually going to be accessed into the Student Help Center as well. It'll be under judging. So we've talked about those two pathways. It's going to be really important for you to review the rubric before you've started your project, hopefully, but definitely during, because you want to make sure that you're documenting everything you need for a successful and high scoring project as you go. So you don't have to go back and say, well, does anyone remember what we did on December 3rd? Because I don't have the notes from it, or I don't have, how did this experiment turn out? I don't remember. So you definitely want to go through the rubrics. And what I've done actually here is I've taken a little snip of one of the rubrics. And both of the rubrics are different. So make sure you've downloaded the correct one to share with your group. I recommend printing it out and reviewing it kind of periodically, maybe every week would be a great way to do, and especially before you submit your mission folder. But you can see that there's going to be a bunch of little questions. Like this one is what problem in your community will your team attempt to solve using the engineering design process? Why did your team choose this problem to try and solve? So you can clearly tell that I pulled this one from the engineering, but it's going to show the grading system, and the grading system are very similar for both of them. So 0 points if you don't even state a problem, 15 points if you state a very unique community-based problem, and somewhere in the middle is state a community-based problem but rather generic in nature. So for an example, it could be, if you were working on let's just say a food bank robot or something like that, and you don't state any of the problem, you're not going to get any points. If you just say you're working towards ending hunger, that's pretty generic, but at least you've stated a problem. If you stated a very unique problem, you've said, food banks are closing, we need something automated that will provide some service after hours. So this is why we've created this food bank robot. There you go. You're going to get a higher score than if you just kind of give us a vague explanation of what you're doing. And it's the same thing that you'll see a nice little breakdown of every question and how you're scoring. So there shouldn't be any big surprises when you're scoring. And just so you know, you will have multiple judges viewing your mission folder. So you won't just have one judge's score. So that'll be good for you. If you get a judge who might judge you a little harsher, or someone who might think your project is the greatest idea ever. It evens out and it's a pretty fair playing field. So I definitely want to encourage you guys to be looking at those rubrics. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the judging criteria besides the rubrics. They're going to judge on the biggest portion is the application of either the scientific inquiry using scientific practices or the engineering design process. And that again goes back to those two different pathways. They're also going to judge you based on team collaboration. Make sure that this is a team effort. I have seen some of these projects come in saying, I did all of the work, my team did nothing. Or I can't tell you what these people did. I can only tell you what I did, and I'm the one typing. We want this to be a team community problem and team effort to fix it. And then a benefit to the community. So I definitely want to encourage you guys, when you have an idea, maybe if you haven't done all of your research yet or your project, run it by people, run it by your team advisor, run it by other people in your community, or even our cyber guides. If you're unsure if your project idea has been replicated a bunch before, or if you think you have a really unique idea. So definitely get feedback before you do things and after, but I like to always try and save myself some work and not, go down a path that I think is going to be fruitless. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay. And I we've touched on this a little bit, but I know that we've said what makes a mission folder great. And I just wanted to go back and ask any of our cyber guides if there's anything in particular that you haven't mentioned previously that you would look for when judging a eCYBERMISSION folder, not just in a regular project, but in our competition. What would you look for a winning folder? If anyone has feedback on that. I know we've covered most of that just based on what makes a mission folder great. So I think we'll move on. And if something comes to mind later, guides, please just let me know and we can share on that. But I think you guys did a pretty good job covering that in the beginning. So insider tip 4 is make sure you list all of the steps in your investigation or the construction of your model and prototype. So the biggest thing on this is even if everything makes sense to your team, it needs to make sense to our judges who are looking at this from a third perspective. We don't know what you've been doing. We don't know all the work that came in. We don't understand maybe some of your, if you shorthand something or say, turn on the lever, I could be like, what lever are they talking about? So you definitely want to say, turn on the lever to the water or something to that nature. You want to be as descriptive as possible. I would rather you write more details than not enough details. So I have no idea what your project is doing. You would want to have such a clear description of your process that someone could repeat your experiment and compare their results, which happens a lot in the science field. People repeat experiments all the time or design prototypes. And also it's helpful if you ever want to go back and make tweaks to your prototype or to your experiment. If you want to see if there's some sort of flaw in your variables or your data documenting, you can go back if you clearly lay out all of the steps that you're taking. So it's not only helpful for you, but it's great for the judges too. We talked about this a little bit just to make sure everything is clear. It's like this little graphic below. It's sometimes I say I think I'm making sense, but it could sound like total gibberish to someone else. But that's just because all of our brains are wired so differently. We talked about it before. Everyone has different strengths, so you want to try and give it to people in as plain and simple terms as possible. And one of the ways we recommend doing that is even have one of your other students review your work. Say, hey, can you read this? Does this make sense to you? And you don't have to give them any sort of verbal explanation. Just see if everything you've written down makes sense to someone else. And if you have to explain it verbally to them, add that explanation to your mission folder answer, and that'll get you a higher scoring. I wanted to ask some of our cyber guides if they have peer review in their workplace. I'm sure they do, or if they have before they send out any sort of data or presentation, if they have a coworker look at it.
Yeah, so definitely when we're working on like papers that are going to get submitted or funding applications, it's definitely really beneficial to have other people provide feedback, because yeah, once you get really into a project, everything probably makes a lot of sense to you and is really laid out in your mind. But when you have someone that hasn't been spending, a couple months working on it, they're not going to be up to speed as quickly. So it's really helpful if you can have someone else read it for you, just to make sure, hey, is this just really making sense to me because I wrote it and I did X, Y, or Z for the project, or does this make sense to someone who maybe has a little bit of an external viewpoint? So definitely very useful, and definitely something we do all the time.
Awesome. Alex, Gregory, Keaton.
In science, it's very important that you have somebody else look over your work. Personally, I'm always afraid I misspelled something, but as Alexa was saying, when you're doing the work, everything usually makes really good sense to you, and you need somebody outside of your product to look at it, to point out to you the things that to you are probably obvious because you've been doing it, but you forgot to mention it. And so to somebody who has never seen it before, they might not actually understand what's going on. So I think this is a very important part of the process.
Perfect. And Keaton, did you have something to add?
Reach out to the university professors if you can, if you have someone in your neighborhood, or if you can even send them an email and get them on board. Let them review it once, or let your teachers do that also. Either way, it's fine. And that's something which will bring you to the mainland stream and impress our judges.
Alex, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say that having somebody else look at your description, what you've written, or in your whole package, it's not just to point out mistakes or tell you that what you did wrong, but a lot of it is because we forget what it was like at the beginning of the project. And once you're a few weeks or a few months in, you're like a different person and you don't even remember what it was like to be yourself at the beginning. And you're going to write stuff that you did, and you're going to, like just like this cartoon, it's going to make perfect sense to you. But then if you show it to someone else who is kind of like you at the beginning, they might have all these questions like, but what about this? How did you really do that? Or what about, are you including steps here? Are you missing some? Are you not writing about some that you did? So it's really a lot more just to like get the perspective of somebody who isn't familiar with what you did, and make sure that what you're writing is clear to someone like that. And that's going to be like the judges.
That's perfect. I think of that every day when I write myself. Sometimes I write myself sticky notes and they make sense when I'm writing them, but I go back to them and I'm like, what does 3 eggs mean? What was this something I needed to get at the store? Was this for a recipe? It's the same thing. It may make sense to you while you're doing it, but I should have written out 3 eggs for the chocolate cake, something like that. So take the time to document everything and make sure it makes sense. All right, so the next slide is going to be, make sure you're editing, polishing, and proofreading. Have a grown-up read through your mission folder. Your team advisor is going to be the one that submits the mission folder when it's completed, but the more eyes, the better. I can't tell you how many times I've sent emails and I've noticed a typo after, and I thought, oh, I checked that, but if I had someone else check it, I could have stopped this typo or error from going out. Another thing is, if you're including any sort of links in your mission folder, make sure that they're accessible on outside networks. For example, if you're linking to something that could be maybe in your school network, or a link that you have to have a sign in for, you want to make sure you're not going to use those links and find a different way to present the data. whether that's, taking screen caps of it and fixing and cropping it up so that we can see what's going on. But you can also have another adult test out your links just to make sure they're going to work, because we would hate for points to be deducted just because a link isn't working. I wanted to take a second really quickly and talk about the competition timeline. It stays roughly the same length of time every year. Our registration opened in August. I know some of you are just now getting started on your projects, and that's fine. I don't want to freak you guys out. You have plenty of time. They are due on March 1st. That does not mean I think you should finish your project on March 1st. I think you should have your project finished as soon as you feel comfortable and give yourself some breathing room to look over for those errors, to look over for any edits, to make sure that you have people going through your folders and making sure everything looks great. After the folders are due, virtual judging is March 15th through the 29th. And then our staff will let students know as they move along in the process. We have regional judging, and then that goes on to national judging. So that being said, I hope that, the majority of students will not advance to the next round. However, I think that this is great practice for the real world. I hope that it gives you guys a chance to learn and come back next year and do an even better mission project, and also just get a chance to talk to some really cool, knowledge, fun people in the STEM field and get some of that interaction. I know our next CyberGuide live chat actually is going to have a NASA feature. So we hope that you don't just focus necessarily on winning, although I know that's easier said than done. I do think it's cool that you guys are looking at stuff in your community and trying to help. So I just wanted to kind of recap everything before we open the floor to questions. I know that we've covered a lot of material, but you really want to have this to be a team collaborative project. And by doing that, it's brainstorming with your group. Maybe get with your group, get a piece of paper out and write what you believe makes a mission folder great. I would also recommend creating a list with your team of things to double check before you submit your mission folders, and ensure all of your mission folders questions are answered and thoroughly and accurately. So with that being said, I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to actually open up the floor to our CyberGuide. So you guys can take this time to ask them questions about your project. If you have specific questions about eCYBERMISSION, one of our staff will answer those questions. And I'm also going to go back through all of my questions. I know in the beginning, I had some questions coming in that were sent directly to me instead of everyone. So that is why if your question has gone unanswered, I've been unable to look at those questions while I've been presenting. But if you want to unmute yourself, turn your video on, you can leave it off, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. And if you have a question for a specific guide, you can direct that to them. Otherwise, we'll just open the floor and any of our guides who feel comfortable answering a question can. So we will go ahead and get started. Graham, you're raising your hand. If you want to unmute yourself, you can ask a question.
So, so for the thing, so like, how will they know that you can go on to the next round? Will they like email you?
Yeah, so our staff will reach out to the team advisor, and the team advisor will notify their students. So
Thank you.
you'll find out. You're welcome.
When do they receive their feedback, Rachel?
So their feedback should be sent to them. I don't know, Catherine or Carrie, if you want to answer the exact timeline on that.
Yes. So on our website, the first week of May, I believe around May 5th, we will post on our website a list of each state's winners. And so you'll see who our state winners are for each state. So you can look there. And at that time also, we will open up on our website where your team advisor will be able to see your team's score range and the comments that you received. We take an average of the 3 judges' scores, and you'll get, see a score range on there, as well as the comments from our judges. So look after May 5th, be watching our website, and we'll post it out there. We'll also kind of post links on our social media too if you follow us. And those are great questions.
Awesome. All right. Jalen, I think you have your hand raised. If you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question.
If your mission project is far-reaching beyond just your community, will points be deducted or will you kind of keep the same score?
Catherine,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It's up to our judges, of course, because we're having 3 judges judge it, and maybe our CyberGuides can jump in there. I would recommend, though, under that question about community benefit, you talk about, how it's not benefits, your community and, the broader world, if you will, or your state or, your country, the country or anything like that. But maybe Gregory or Alex, who've judged a couple times, might be able to help answer that as well from their perspective as past judges.
Okay, Layla, if you want to, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you can unmute
hang
your.
on, Rachel. I think
Yeah.
Gregory was going to actually offer some insight from a
Oh,
judge
okay,
perspective.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I mentioned this at the last CyberGuide outing, but one way to make your broader project more of a local community thing is to interact with people in your community, talk to your parents, talk to your advisor, who in your city council, is there someone in your city council that has to deal with this problem? And you could talk to them about tell them your idea for dealing with this problem, and then maybe they'll have some ideas, some local examples about how that works for your actual community, some important ideas for your actual community. And I believe I talked about this I think it's really cool for these sort of community-driven projects if you're actually talking to people in your community about it, local experts in your community. Again, talk with your advisor, talk to your parents. Maybe they know somebody that is familiar with this problem in your community and can provide some insight.
Perfect. Thank you. Layla, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Thank you. I was just wondering, like, if my team and I decided to include an interview in our mission folder, would it have added value to include the actual video or to just include the questions and answers?
Yeah, if one of our CyberGuides wants to answer as a virtual judge perspective.
Sure. Hi, Layla. I would, if it's a short interview or the video, or if you're able to do any video editing and get it down to maybe less than 10 minutes, let's say, the judge, you have to remember that the judges, a lot of us are encouraged to judge, more than 20 folders. So we don't really have like an extra 30 minutes to sort of look at all your videos or even read very long documents that you might submit. So I would say, if you could edit down to some highlights and post a video with a link that the judges could look at. Some of them, I think will watch it, or if you have a way to get down, maybe you would attach like the whole questions and answers, but then maybe at the beginning of that document, like put some highlights or a summary of the most important things you learned so that the judges could read that in maybe 2 minutes, and instead of having to like read for 20 minutes and find those highlights themselves. So yeah, I think having courtesy to the judges and recognizing that they have a bit of limited time and they have to go through a lot of folders would help guide you to the what's best. It doesn't hurt to attach things or put links, right? Like usually more is better, but if it can be organized, then you give the judge the option of how much, depending on how much time they have to spend.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. So I have a couple of questions that some of our eCYBERMISSION staff has answered already in the chat, but I just wanted to, before I go back to those, I wanted to see if any other students had questions, if they want to unmute themselves and ask our cyber guides before I go to the questions that have been answered by our staff. Graham, did you have another question? You can unmute yourself.
So per se, like if you're gonna do something on like a plant, like would you have to bring like a real plant like into where you guys can judge it or no?
No, so everything is going to be virtual. So you can have pictures of the plant in your project, but this is a completely virtual competition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have anything else before we go back to some of our questions that have been answered a little bit? I know that we have some of our students asking, they have trouble finding which category that their project would fall under. Excuse me. And if you have that question and you don't want to share your project idea right now in front of everyone else, I would encourage you to post it in the message board. If you're still not comfortable doing that, you can always email Mission Control, and that contact is, I'll have one of our staff members post that into the chat box below. But like, I appreciate you guys taking thought into making sure that you're choosing the correct path for your project. We have some of our students have asked, they don't have access to a lab, and they wanted to know if any of our cyber guides had any resources for that. I know that I would really encourage you guys to reach out to your team advisors to see if an adult can help facilitate something. If you need to have access, sometimes maybe a local high school could partner with you. If you're in middle school, they seem to have a little bit more tools and equipment, but if any of our cyber guides have any insight on that, you're welcome to share that as well.
So post this, Ketan, I'll just try to answer that very briefly. Post your questions on the mission folder as explained by Rachel, and then we'll try to see what best we can do for you. Put in the specific topics, do some search, and you'll figure out there's someone who is keen, who is already doing some research on it. But the first step, if you are in middle school, look for it in the high school, and then go a little stepwise over there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what I was thinking too. It's not a one size fits all on the answer, but if any of our other cyber guides have anything to add.
I mean, I love to see resourceful students with their projects. So we're definitely not expecting you guys to have access to a lab. I mean, your kitchen is oftentimes mostly as good, or just a little bit of space where you could grow some plants or whatever, do whatever kind of activities you're going to do. But you probably shouldn't be working with very toxic things. You don't need fancy measurements usually. So yeah, focus on keeping it simple, and we're definitely not expecting you to do things outside of what the resources you might have in a typical kitchen or home.
Perfect. Yeah, I definitely think that you guys can still have super cool experiments and, find ways to make them work without having access to a fancy lab, even as cool as that does sound. I get why we want that, but I definitely think that can happen. Do we have another question? Do we have any more questions? I know that we're wrapping up on the hour, and I just wanted to do one more quick look and see if we had any questions that weren't answered. Okay. With that being said, I do want to encourage you guys to use our message board feature. We have some of our cyber guides that actually have profiles in them that have already been posted, and it kind of just shows exactly, answer some of the questions that you may have for them, how they got involved into the STEM field, what did they do, where did they go, where did they go to school, what was their field. And we're also going to have one more cyber guide live chat, and you will get the information for that hopefully in the next week or so, and that is going to be with our NASA counterparts. So they are going to come and speak about Artemis 1 and be super exciting. So we definitely want you guys to come out for that one. And if you've missed any of today's presentation or logged on late, we will have this video uploaded on YouTube. So if you want to, come back, and if you think you missed something, please check out our YouTube channel and you'll be able to see this. And we do have one, when does that NASA event take place? So I will send out the correct details. We're still finalizing the details of some of their speakers, but it will be in late in February, when that right before the mission folder deadline is. We have a couple more questions that I think our eCYBERMISSION staff will just answer in our chat, but we had one asking, have you noticed most students using recycled materials for prototype building? I'm not sure if anyone here, I know Alex and Gregory, you guys have been judges. Have you noticed anything with that? I saw Alex commented back in the chat, at least inexpensive materials. Yes, absolutely. I think especially because you are building prototypes, things are going to break and not work. All right. Well, it looks like we have answered all of our questions. And like we've said previously, please email us at missioncontrol@eCyberMission.com. If we have not, you need to speak to an eCYBERMISSION staff member. If you have a question for a CyberGuide that comes up later, or you haven't had the chance to ask today, please post on our message board. So with that being said, I want to give a great big thank you to our eCYBERMISSION staff for coming on, and an even bigger thank you for our CyberGuides coming on today and giving you guys some great insight, feedback, and some time. So thank you guys, and I hope everyone has a great week.